The Nuremberg Trials. In 1945, World War II was over. The question of what should be done with the many Nazi war criminals arose. These were the people who orchestrated and participated in things like night raids, forced deportation, and mass genocide. The leaders of the Allied powers had to decide what to do. They had a few options. They could do nothing at all. They could sentence every one of them to death, regardless of whether they committed any war crimes or not. Or their third option was justice through persecution, which was the most popular option. The Nuremberg Trials were a series of prosecutions to decide the fates of those war criminals. They were held in Nuremberg, Germany, where several Nazi rallies were held during the war. The Nuremberg Trials were the first time in history where an international court sentenced people to prison and death, and it set the stage for an international court of justice in the future. The Nuremberg Trials were directed by the Allies: France, America, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain. They ran into some immediate difficulties. Since each country had their own sets of laws, they had to agree on one way to try each criminal. This was called the London Charter of the International Military Tribunal. According to that, each defendant was allowed a defense attorney of their choosing, and instead of one judge, there was a tribunal or 4 judges, one from each Allied country. The London Charter of the International Military Tribunal also clearly defined the 3 major charges each criminal would face: crimes against peace, such as planning and starting a war crimes, such as violation of the rules of war set before World War II, like executing prisoners, and crimes against humanity, like extermination, deportation, and genocide of civilian people. A person could be indicted for any and all of these crimes. Another big problem they faced was the problem of languages. This trial was held between English, French, German, and Russian speakers. They did not know how to communicate efficiently with each other. This is where the idea of simultaneous interpretation was born. Translators interpret what is being said while it is being said. The Nuremberg trial was not the only trial. There were several others, such as the doctor's trial and the judge's trial. The Nuremberg trial was just for the worst offenders. At the beginning of the trial, prosecution was afraid that there would be no evidence to prove these men were responsible for the atrocities committed during the war. But they soon realized that the Germans documented everything they did. The prosecution was able to pull many incriminating documents, including ones that said the Germans were planning to start a war by whatever means necessary. The primary defense was that the crimes were only made illegal after they were committed. The counter was that some crimes are so universally immoral that they shouldn't require a precedent. The criminals would also insist that they were just following orders. The counter for this was that they should have known these orders were immoral and used their better judgment and disobeyed them. The outcome of the Nuremberg trials were 12 death sentences, 3 life in prison, 4 lengthy jail terms, and 3 were acquitted.
Attention! Tribunal!
Judges from Britain, America, Russia, and France assemble in Nuremberg's courthouse. After a first day spent in reading the 30,000-word indictment, the unemotional tones of Lord Justice Lawrence, President of the Court, open the second day's proceedings.
On Thursday, the 18th of October, 1945, in Berlin, the indictment was lodged with the tribunal, and a copy of that indictment in the German language has been furnished to each defendant and has been in his possession for more than 30 days.
So begins the case of humanity against the makers of war.
The defendants to plead guilty or not guilty to the charges against them. Hermann Wilhelm Goering.
Thinner, and without the notorious medals, the once mighty Nazi number 2 still postures in the limelight.
No chances were being taken at Nuremberg as the hour of verdicts and sentences approached. A wide military cordon ringed the courthouse, and many additional troops were on guard to deal with any eventuality. The verdict on Hess was delivered in Russian, but it might have been any language for all the attention Hess paid to it. Mr. Justice Biddle dealt with Ribbentrop's case.
The tribunal finds that Ribbentrop is guilty on all 4 counts.
Streicher. His persecution of the Jews was notorious. The tribunal finds that Streicher is not guilty on count 1, but that he is guilty on count 4.
The tribunal finds that Schott is not guilty on this indictment and directs that he shall be discharged by the marshal when the tribunal presently adjourns.